All right, so hello, horror fans. This is Pete from the Lassercast, and down below there, Brady Bunch style, is my partner in crime, Danny, Dr. Zayas God. Danny, how are you doing today?
I'm just sitting here being a sexy middle-aged man. That's it. That's all I can
Yes,
do.
that's one of the requirements. That's right. And then, another sexy middle aged man from the New York area, right over there, Mr. Mike Bongiorno from, wow, it's when I'm rushing this shit, I forget. Pop Culture Man Children. Mike, welcome
What's
to the
up?
Lassercast.
It's good to be here. I was going to say back here. I've been here before, right?
Yeah.
You have been here. Yes,
Good to be back here.
Yes. We talked about aliens one time on here.
And we don't need to talk about it today. We'll
There you
save
go.
some time.
Yes, they know it's a time crunch. We got 1 hour. We have 1 hour to rush through entries 23 to 11 on Shudder's 101 Scariest Horror Movie Moments. So with that being said, let's dive right in. Let's descend into number 23, The Descent. Is this a number 23 ranking to you guys? What do you think? Worth it?
Right off the bat, at the end of last week's episode, I said I'm going to make a list of what I think is going to be in the top 23, and this was one of my outside chances. Charlotte and I just watched this, and Charlotte even said the scariest parts for her were not the monsters. It was the scenes of them going through the caves and it getting tighter and tighter. And Charlotte was like sitting there like this on the couch, like, this is, I can't. And like you actually start like feeling yourself having trouble breathing watching parts of this movie. I always found it funny. A horror movie came out around the same time called The Cave. And I'll never forget seeing that and thinking, there's nothing claustrophobic at all in this movie. The whole movie takes place in this wide open space. And The Descent is the complete opposite. And yeah, I love this movie. There are so many great jump scares in it. Yeah, that's my take.
It's definitely a jump scare movie. One of the things that's, I'm sure you guys have been talking about this, but one of the things that's always hard about lists is, are we talking about great films or are we talking about scariest films? And also, how much are they dedicated to the conceit that they're picking one moment? Because sometimes they pick a film that I'm like, I agree, but they don't pick the moment that I agree with. And I'm like, how would you not pick that moment? There's one on this list like that. So this is a perfect jump scare movie. I don't know if it's the best film, but I have one memory from it, which is I saw it in a huge theater, packed. One of the best cinematic experiences. People were screaming and shouting. And when the movie was over, a young kid got up and went, "Why'd they start with the car crash?" And I went, "To set up the theme of human frailty." I don't think he liked my response, but
Yeah, I love Staten Island movie theaters, man. You guys have an Alamo Draft House now, but what I was gonna say was that awesome. Mike, you bring up this point of, well, what particular moment do we show from specific movies? And I feel like with this particular list and for this week, they kind of do a little hand waving. And they're like, oh, well, this scene's good. Another scene is this one. And it's like, well, which one are you talking about? And I feel like with The Descent, they are talking about two moments. They're talking about the claustrophobia that you feel throughout the movie. And there's one scene in particular where it's really strong. And then they also talk about that moment where they turn on the night vision camera and you see the creature. And so it's like, well, which one is it? Yeah. I think, going along with what Danny said, it's the claustrophobia that's scarier for this movie.
Right.
But yeah, The Descent, I remember when it came out, it was a very big deal. People were talking about how scary this movie was. And watching it on this list, I was like, yeah, it makes sense. It's on here. Who here is a fan of the Saw franchise?
I gotta go.
You're not a fan?
No. I only ever saw the first one, to be honest with you. But I didn't like it. Mm-hmm. I always felt like it was aping David Fincher's 90s style. And at the time I was very hard on torture porn movies. Now that I look back and I think about the Iraq War and like why we were obsessed with torture, I feel a little easier about it. Maybe I should revisit it, but I'm not a huge fan of Saw.
Okay. Danny, how many movies are in the Saw franchise? Like 12?
I believe Spiral I believe Spiral, the Chris Rock one, was the 9th. So there was Saw the Final Chapter was part 7. Yeah. Then they made Jigsaw, which is 8. Oh, so Spiral was 9, and then they're coming out with Saw X soon.
Okay.
I've seen them all. Charlotte and I, yes, my not yet 12-year-old daughter has watched all of the movies, and we have ranked them on the channel before. I didn't love the original Saw when I saw it, but then I went back, and over the years I've revisited it a bunch of times, and I've kind of grown to love it. Saw 1 and Saw 2, I think, are easily the best of the entire set. And then they start to go in and out of quality. But, you know, if you're in it for the traps and the blood, they're all kind of fun. I'll never forget Lori, who we've had on our channel. She's one of Ghost Girl Greetings, amazing artist. I saw this movie in the theater with her and a few other people. And just as like I don't even know what made me say it, but right as the ending is about to happen, I just turned to her and I go, I bet you the guy gets up off the floor. And then he sat up and she went, oh my God, you ruined it. Why'd you? I said, I didn't know. It was a stupid guess. Yeah. And it's just one of those things that I'll always remember about this movie. But that ending is super iconic. His voice, game over, as he slams the door. Like they've been trying to ape that moment in every sequel and so many other movies since then. I thought Saw was going to be on the list. I thought it was either going to be this or they even showed it, Amanda getting out of the bear trap.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like.
Yeah, you know, Danny and I have covered the Saw movies on our channel. I think we've covered every single one in the franchise. And I always liked the sort of the soap opera nature of it, where it's like this ongoing story, and there are always these people that are brought into Jigsaw's games, and there was always some sort of flashback to something that happened before he died. I, like you, Mike, I'm not really a fan of torture porn, or if something seems like it's cruel to be done just for exploitation's sake. I don't like that. It's like, oh, we're gonna try to be as disturbing as possible. Like that's the goal. I don't like that, and that's what Saw felt like to me at first. But I think it's kind of more than that. I think that it has its own mythos, and
I think that the phrase torture porn gets thrown around a lot, especially at that time, that like early to mid aughts period where it was the Saw franchise, it was the Hostel movies coming out. And then it was there was the new wave of French extreme cinema that was coming out, and like Martyrs and Frontiers and High Tension, all those movies were coming out. And it was just like, how much gore and blood can you possibly have? People must like get off on this. But I think like when you look back at them, given a scope of time, there is more to like one of the talking heads said, you know, you walked out of Saw and you wanted to be a better person because you didn't want to like piss off the Jigsaw in your area. And also like the same thing I felt with Hostel, where like to me Hostel was disgusting, it was gory, it was bloody, but to me it was less torture porn and more of like a takedown of rampant capitalism. In the way that like it's these extremely wealthy people paying for the right to torture the proletariat, and maybe that's the history teacher in me coming out. But I think the Saw franchise has really, I think it's kind of, I think it's proven it's what's the phrase? The
lasting power?
Yeah, thank you. I'm struggling here. But yeah, and it's also James Wan and Lee Winnell, and look where their careers have gone.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And, that's interesting. Oh, go ahead. Were you going to say something, Mike?
I was going to say, I should revisit it because it's interesting that you both agree that you like it more now than when you first saw it. That's rare, I think, in a film.
Well, I think that just having this channel in general and talking to Danny makes me appreciate horror movies more in general. And I've just like watched so much more that when something has a presence like these movies do, it makes me appreciate them more. Mm-hmm. But one movie that has a presence is Scanners. And particularly, and they really just focus on this one scene from the movie.
Because it's not a horror movie, really.
No,
it's not. It's weird that it's on this list, to be honest with you.
It's very much a science fiction movie with one scene. Like, I don't mind. They've had a bunch of movies on this list that toe that horror line. And to me, I've never been like somebody who's like, oh, to me, if you're going to call them scariest moments, or, you know, then I'm totally cool with this moment being there, because it's 100% iconic.
Mm-hmm.
I also, and maybe this is a harsh take, I don't think Scanners is that good. I'm not a huge fan of a lot of early Cronenberg stuff. Yeah. Like, I don't love The Brood. I don't love this. Videodrome, I think, was the movie where I finally was like, okay, I kind of get why people love this guy. To me, his movies always had iconic moments in the middle of like a not so great whole, kind of like Frozen, the animated movie. You know, Let It Go was a great 4-minute song in the middle of what's really a pretty shitty animated movie, but you're not really allowed to say that.
Whoa. Wow. Shots fired at Disney. Jeez, all right. This took a turn I wasn't expecting.
I liked Frozen too. I don't like Frozen.
Okay.
If you've never seen Scanners, like, seriously, watch the head explode, and then I would skip the rest of the movie.
It's a GIF. Find the GIF. Yeah. It's pretty amazing because the face goes forward. That's what makes it so amazing. But I agree with what Danny said. I mean, I wrote my master's thesis on David Cronenberg's movies.
Okay.
That's awesome.
I focused on Crash, A History of Violence, and Existenz. Probably Existenz is my favorite of his movies. But I do tend to like the later ones, or the very, very early ones, like his student films, like the original Crimes of the Future. Not the one that just came out, but like the original he made it's almost indecipherable, but he made it in college, and it's like brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Scary is one of his lesser movies, honestly. I was surprised to see it, and I was surprised to see Brood a couple episodes back too.
Yeah. With him, it's like I actually have not seen this movie. There's 2 movies on this list I haven't seen. Scanners is one of them. The other one is really embarrassing.
Alien. I know you have to see Alien already. Come on.
Finally, no. Night of the Living Dead. I have not seen, and I'm on the last cast. I know. I'm sorry, Mike. For those of you that are listening on the podcast, Mike his head almost exploded just now. But
I did like just to bring up the show. I loved Joe Bob going off on a little tangent about what is the greatest exploding head in the history of horror. I live in Brooklyn, not too far, a few exits on the Belt Parkway away from what I refer to as Maniac Point, which is where they filmed the scene in Maniac where Tom Savini's head blows up from a shotgun blast. That and Scanners are probably 1 and 2 on my list.
Yeah. I mean, I need to see it at some point because I love Michael Ironside. And then I actually would like to read your thesis, Mike, too, because I actually like Cronenberg, but
you're the first person who's ever said that.
Well, there you go. I'm trying to get in your pants, I guess. But like, I was going to say that for Cronenberg, I'm actually not that familiar with his horror stuff. I've seen The Fly, and that's about it. And then and not even this. I've seen like I've seen History of Violence and like a lot of his Viggo Mortensen stuff. But one movie I did see in the theaters, though, that was quite an experience was the movie Wreck. And once they said Wreck was on there, I was like, okay, it's the end. That's what it's going to be. Wreck is very much like the Blair Witch Project, where the moment that really stands out is the last shot, right? Because it's like the part that everyone remembers. And I believe it was the director of It that mentioned that zombie movies usually fall apart by the third act, but that this movie builds up and gets better by the third act. So I thought that was an interesting observation. What do you guys think?
I've never seen this film, I'll be honest with you. This is one of 2 films on this list that I haven't seen.
What's the other one?
Final Destination.
The second one?
Yeah. Final Destination. Yeah, the one that's on this list. Yeah.
Okay. So then, Danny, what do you think of Wreck?
I like it a lot. If you're into found footage, when Charlotte and I were watching it this morning before we went to work, and I literally said, if you ask most people, they'll say this is the best found footage movie, and then they cut to Alex Iso going, "This is the best found footage movie," and I was like, "See, I told you." What I love about this movie, and I sorry, Mike, but they spoil it a little bit in the episode. The whole movie, you're thinking this is some kind of medical issue. Like they're wrapping the building in plastic. They don't want anybody to get out. It's like, is this an infection? Is it like 28 days later where it's like a zombie rage virus? And it's not until that last 5 minutes really where they get up into like the attic and you find out that there was this priest keeping this like possessed woman thing up there, and this is all like some like antichrist style like abomination, as I think it was Anthony Muschietti or Fede Alvarez, one of them mentions it in the as a talking head, and that stuff always creeped the shit out of me. Like, as somebody who's not religious at all, like super religious horror always scared the hell out of me. The all-time scariest movie I ever saw, we'll actually be talking about in a few entries. So,
Nice.
yeah, obviously you have The Exorcist, you have Rosemary's Baby, anything that involves cults or like religious cults, it really creeps me out. So like this whole movie, I remember watching thinking, yeah, this is good. It's pretty scary. Oh, that's a cool scene. And then that last like 5-10 minutes where you're in the total darkness and you see upside down crosses and these ripped out pages of the Bible everywhere. At that point, I was like, oh, fuck. Like, what's going on now? Like, come on. So I kind of forgot about this movie as they were counting down, because the last episode they had Blair Witch and Paranormal Activity. Right. So I guess this is probably the end all be all of found footage at number 20. Yeah.
And so speaking of the number 20, this is actually really fun because the two biggest Stephen King fans I know are in this room with me right now in this chat room. Not my daughter's bedroom, but in this virtual room. The two biggest Stephen King fans that I am friends with. And so, do either of you appreciate the significance of the number that this next movie is on the list?
19.
Oh, of course. Quartet.
Yeah.
The quartet of 19.
Right. Stephen King. I think it's so fitting. Someone at Shudder must have thought to do this to make Stephen King's very first published novel, Carrie, be number 19, the adaptation by Brian De Palma, on this list. And I think that we still might see. No, we're not going to see the 90s It adaptation. No, so this might be it for Stephen King. Oh, no, wait. Of course. There's The Shining.
The Shining.
Yeah. Right. But this one was another one where I felt they kind of played two moments. They talk about like when Carrie has her first period in the beginning of the movie, and then the ending, the slaughter. Oh, and they actually three moments. So they talk about the hand coming up too. So what did you guys think? You think it was the hand was the moment they were talking about?
I remember seeing it as a kid, and that really got me. I mean, I completely hook, line, and sinker. I was like, oh, this is a nice little dream. She's going to put a little flower down, and then boom. And I like that the documentary goes on to say this was the first kind of movie that did that, and look at all these other movies that gave you that one last scare, Friday the 13th, and so yeah, to me that would be the moment.
How, if you don't mind me asking, Mike, how old are you?
I'm 39.
30. Okay, so we're all the same age.
Yep.
Pretty much. But my wife is a little bit older than me, and she said that Carrie, the ending of Carrie, is like the scariest movie moment she's ever seen. So I kind of knew they were going with that, but the scariest moment in Carrie for me has nothing to do with the prom, and it has nothing to do with the final scene. There's a scene after the prom where Carrie's coming home, and she's covered in blood. The prom dress is covered in blood, and she's on the way upstairs to strip off and take a bath. and you just see the silhouette of her mother standing behind the door.
Yep. And
I remember the first time I saw it going, like, because it's almost like Hereditary, where you don't notice it at first, and then when you notice, oh God, who's the actress? She got nominated, Piper Laurie. When you notice Piper Laurie behind the door, you just go, oh fuck, and it's like, and that to me is just this, and especially what you know at that point, what she is about to do. That
Danny,
to
were
me,
you raised Christian?
No, I'm Jewish.
Okay, because I was seeing a connection of like okay, maybe you have a Christian thing going on with fear and stuff.
No.
Yeah, he's scared of Christians. Yeah. Rightfully so. They're scary. We just got canceled.
I'm Jewish, but I was raised in a very. I always joke around that I'm JFH. I'm Jewish for the holidays. We always celebrate the holidays, but I'm bar mitzvahed, but that was over close to 30 years ago. So, yeah that's it.
Yeah, my family loves Stephen King. I said you guys are the Stephen King fans, biggest fans that I know as friends, but my aunt is a member of the Stephen King book club, and she's got every copy of every Stephen King book ever. And I'm hoping that I might inherit that one day. Sorry, Aunt Margaret. I hope you live for another 30 years at least. But
I got my Stephen King collection like right off to the side there. There's all the hardcovers.
Oh, excuse me. Okay. Well, anyway. So Margaret, though, she would always talk about how Carrie's mom was the scariest. I think that kind of goes along with what you were saying, Dan.
Yeah.
Too. Are you a fan of Brian De Palma, Mike? I know you were saying you were a fan of Cronenberg. Do you appreciate Brian De Palma's horror films?
Mean, I appreciate him. The thing with De Palma was always his style was mimicking someone else's style. You could look at his movies and go, oh, he's doing Hitchcock there. Oh, he's doing this there. I don't know what I would say is my favorite De Palma movie, but yeah, I do like De Palma.
Okay. Well,
maybe Snake Eyes. Did he do Snake Eyes? The Nicolas Cage.
He did do Snake Eyes.
He might have. Yeah.
He did. Yeah.
I'm looking at Snake
Eyes. well, here's a good transition.
Raising Cain is a good underrated De Palma movie too, with John Lithgow playing split personalities.
Oh yeah, that one.
That was a good underrated De Palma movie.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I know one director that Mike is a big fan of, and weirdly enough, he's the director of Number 18. We might know him as the director of the classic Superman franchise with Christopher Reeve, but
The Goonies,
or The Goonies,
Lethal Weapon,
right? And yet he's directed one of the scariest horror movies ever made. Here's the thing: Danny and I have talked to death about The Omen, so let's open it up, pop culture man, children style, to Mike Bongiorno.
So, to be totally honest, I never loved The Omen. I never loved it. I don't hate it.
That's it.
Yeah.
You know what it is? I really, really, really love The Exorcist. And in the conversation of The Exorcist, you would always hear Rosemary's Baby and Omen put together. And I went to see those films thinking I'd get a similar thing, which you don't get. But I have to say the moment that they picked is the perfect moment. Although, again, they picked like two. They picked like head coming off and the hanging. But the hanging, to me, that's what I remember. When I think about the movie, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. And her smile, and she's so happy. It's all for you, Damien. And then jumps. That's a perfect moment.
Yeah.
I remember there was one time I was getting intimate with a girlfriend, and I said that to her. I was like, "It's all for you," and she started laughing at me. Like, this actually did happen in my life. But Danny, I think that you think the scariest moment is in the graveyard, right?
That was the moment when I was a kid that I legit ran out of the room and like yelled at my dad, "Stop it, I'm done," and I couldn't finish the movie at that point. As an adult, the scariest moment in this movie for me is the scene where Lee Remick is in the hospital and she's trying to take off her cast and she's trying to get dressed because Gregory Peck called her and told her, "I'm coming to get you." And at that moment where she's completely struggling, you just see ever so slightly the nanny is sneaking into the room and that horrible fucking music is playing. and she turns around and you know, you said it, Mike, this scene, the thing that's so scary about this scene, more than the nanny jumping almost, is Lee Remick's face when she clutches Damien, that look of like pure fear. And she has that look again in the hospital when she realizes the nanny's there to kill her. And then all of a sudden you just see her body come flying through the window and she falls to her death. But every part of this movie is the scariest movie I've ever seen. From the time I was a kid, I can't handle the music. Even now as an adult, I don't like the music, unsettles me. The look on the kid's face, the whole movie. I've met him as an adult. He's a wonderful, funny guy, Harvey Stevens, but he scared him as a child scared me like so much. And yeah, and it's funny. Greg Nicotero is like breaking down the decapitation scene. I sat with an old school VCR remote, pause, rewind, play, pause, because I wanted to see the exact moment where the glass hit, and I wanted to see how they did it, because I think I saw the movie for the first time. I was probably 9 or 10. Yeah, parenting. And I was just fascinated by how they did it. And I remember the one time I like paused it at the perfect moment, and I was like, there it is. And then like they show the picture of him with the head. I was like, holy shit, that's amazing.
And we just lost that actor this year too, right?
David Warner, yeah.
David Warner
just passed away recently.
Yeah.
Great career.
He's excellent, yeah. We talked about that movie to death, but I actually don't have a lot to say about entry number 17, because I admit I have not seen Night of the Living Dead, the original by George Romero. Though when they started talking about moments, there was one moment I was like, oh, okay, that's the one I thought they were going to talk about, because everyone always talks about the end. But I did not know about the other deaths that they referenced. And so, Mike, you said that you also wrote a paper on Night of the Living Dead, right?
Yeah, I presented a paper on it at a conference.
Okay.
So, this is one of my favorite movies ever. And I would say, my thing with this movie is people always talk about the final scene.
Right.
The final scene is very important, but I always feel like people misread it, or they don't read it deep enough. Because I feel like what most people find when they're reading the final scene is, well, it's a shock. And by that, I mean when the sheriff shoots Ben in the window. People say it's a shock. People say it's about the futility of life. People say it's about the unfairness of life. To me, the movie has always, and this is what I wrote about, has always been about misrecognition. He's first misrecognized when Barbara comes to the house. She sees him and she comes back a little bit, and then she realizes he's not a zombie. And then in the end, and then there's all that race stuff that's very obvious in the movie between Mr. Hooper and Ben. To me, one of the best moments in movie history is when Ben says, "You can be the boss down there, I'm the boss up here." Because that's the moment where it's like, maybe a zombie apocalypse is good. Like maybe it'll break down all these hierarchies. But in the end, the thing that I always think is, okay, they see Ben in the window. Why do they shoot? Why immediately do they shoot? Because they assume an African-American man could not be the owner of that house. So it would have to be a zombie. And that's why they shoot. That's always been my reading of it.
Wow. Jeez. Okay. Well, as someone, oh, go ahead.
I guess to piggyback on that, just based on like what you see in the episode, they talk about, obviously the horrible scene in the basement where the daughter kills her parents with the trawl, which is amazing and terrifying. But also then they bring on Tananarive Due, an African-American, teacher, professor, horror writer. And she brings up, the point about the ending and what that scene means. And, like Romero always claimed that he didn't cast Dwayne Jones and that he just took the guy with the best performance. And it's like, it's funny how like everyone who knew Romero kind of calls him out on that as total bullshit. And they're like, he knew what he was doing. Like,
it's so obvious in the film. I mean, there's a scene where Mr. Cooper is like, okay, well, the girl's going to come with us. And it's like, why do you assume that you become the leader? Like it's just because he's like, I'm the white guy, I'm the leader, right? It's so. Pete, can I just ask you? And there's no insult in this. You never caught it. You stayed away from it. How did you never see it in all this time?
Thank you. That is a good question. I was very scared of things just in general for most of my life, and then becoming a father has made me much more brave, I guess, right? But one of the things that scared me the most were zombies, and so I avoided zombies as much as I possibly could. Okay. Up until I was like in my 20s, and then with The Walking Dead, it was just like oversaturated, and I just wasn't scared of them anymore. So now at this point, it's just a matter of I'm always reviewing so much content. I haven't watched it, but I'm not scared of it anymore, and I know it's like the classic for zombie movies.
It's also guaranteed that if you are making a horror movie and you want to have a horror movie playing on the TV in the background, it will always be Night of the Living Dead because it's in the public domain, which is why it's in the original Halloween, or Halloween 2 rather. It's in basically every horror movie. There is going to be a scene where the people, Charlotte and I were watching something the other night, and I was like, they're watching Night of the Living Dead. And she was like, how do you know? I'm like, because they're always watching Night of the Living Dead.
It's either that or Murnau's Nosferatu.
Or I think the original Haunting, House on Haunted Hill is also in public domain also.
Yeah.
But like, there's
thematically relevant movies that have to do with your life.
Yes, that's the best. I have to admit because you asked me, Mike, how come I haven't seen Night of the Living Dead? I actually have to admit it's 3 movies I haven't seen on this list. The next one too, another classic, number 16, The Exorcist 3. Movie. Yeah.
I did a list of my last year at Halloween on my podcast, Pop Culture Man Children, available anywhere pods are found. I did a list of best jump scares, and this was on my list.
Oh yeah.
It elevates the whole movie. The movie's good. It's not great. It's not on par with the first movie. It's interesting, but this elevates it to this level. I mean, exactly how it's broken down in this episode is what I would say. It's long, it's boring. There's like 2 fake jumps before the jump. You don't even see what happens. It's just masterful. It's just masterful.
I showed this to Charlotte, and I told her, you have to come and watch this scene. It's the greatest jump scare in movie history. So she sat down, and then that fake jump scare that they show, she was like, oh, that wasn't that bad. And then she just sat and she kept watching, and then all of a sudden the scene happens, and she was like, whoa! And I was like, yes! And she's sitting right over there. So first of all, when you said you didn't see it, Charlotte gave me a look like, what? I've seen it.
Yeah.
And then she goes, the scissors, right? I said, yeah.
Yeah.
Peter, have you seen Exorcist 2?
I saw like The Exorcist 2 like on channel.
It's not going to be on this list.
No.
It's going to be on a different list of the
worst. Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. I actually love Brad Dourif, and I haven't seen enough Brad Dourif in my life. And I know he's in this movie, and I know he does a great performance in this movie.
So awesome. So weird. And I love that the episode called out the dream sequence where George C. Scott's roaming through a dream hospital, and there's Fabio on one side and Patrick Ewing at the height of his Knicks like superstardom is just sitting there with angel's wings on. You're like, what the fuck am I watching? It is a bonkers movie, but this happens to be, I think it was Rebecca McKendry said, if you like Google jump scare, this is probably the one you're going to see.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's perfect.
More prestigious than the Exorcist series would have to be the Final Destination series, which brings us to number 15 on our list. So I have seen this movie. It's kind of sad. I haven't seen The Exorcist 3 or Night of the Living Dead, but I've seen this movie. And it was interesting that they said Final Destination 2, but when you think about it, when you think of Final Destination, everyone always thinks about those logs on the truck. And so, yeah, go ahead, Danny.
This was the entry where when I was watching it today at work during my lunch period, I I looked down, I went, what? And then I was like, hell yes. Because literally people who don't know what number in the franchise this is will not drive behind a log truck because of this movie. And any movie moment that does that to pop culture, to the zeitgeist, it's like Jaws, it's like Psycho, where like you think of showers, you think of Psycho. You go to the beach, you hear dana dana. You know, if you see a truck on the highway carrying logs, you instantly think of this franchise. And if you know the number of the sequel, you think of this exact scene, and it has to be on the list because of that. So I applaud them for putting that on here. And this is easily my favorite movie in that franchise.
Yes.
Okay. I was going to say, I agree with you because I haven't seen it, yet I know the scene. And I think about it when I see that on the highway. It's you're right. It's part of the cultural fabric.
Yes. So, Mike, don't take this as an insult, but why haven't you seen Final Destination 2?
I think it came. When did it come out?
Probably like early 2000s.
Yeah, early 2000s. Who knows what I was up to, man?
Yeah,
I mean? So long ago.
Yeah, I probably thought I was like better than it. Yeah. I probably was like, I'm gonna go home and watch The Exorcist 3 instead.
Do you know what I found interesting? I did like when they were talking about The Omen that they referenced the Final Destination series, because The Omen kind of does that with the whole Omen, the photographs kind of showing, and like he even gives the hint that he's going to be decapitated because he has like the photograph of him with like his head separated from the rest of his body.
Right.
And I never would have made that connection. Right. Until they did it on this list. So I thought that was pretty cool that Shudder had the presence of mind to make that connection.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Danny. With this list in particular, they don't really have a lot of those like paired up movies, right, on this list?
Well, I think they're getting down to the nitty gritty now. The next three of the next four movies would have been in my top 10, maybe even top 5.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if anyone is a subscriber to our channel, follows our channel, you guys know that Danny loves Jaws. Like I think he references Jaws like every episode.
I mean, Jaws is maybe the best movie ever. I don't not film, but it's the best movie ever. And I have to say, I'm excited. I was excited to see this. What made me excited about seeing this was, on the old series, Bravo's 100 Scariest Movies, it was number 1, and I always hated it. I was like, because I love Jaws, but Jaws to me is an adventure film that has scares. So you had all this gothic stuff, and then number 1 is Jaws. I always felt like, I like Clive Barker talking about S&M. What are we going to talk about with Jaws? Right. So I was glad because I was like, okay, I know it's not going to be number 1.
Yes. Did you see?
I get the iconicness of this opening scene.
Yeah.
But in terms of the scares in Jaws, the Ben Gardner's head popping out of the boat,
that's it,
is maybe up there on the all-time jump scare list. My sister, to this day, she's 30 years old, cannot watch that scene, cannot handle the musical cue that happens when his head pops out of the boat. So even the greatest, what I would argue is the greatest jump scare in movie history, is him chumming and making sarcastic comments backwards, and then boom, no music, no nothing. The shark just comes out of the water, and it leads to one of the greatest lines in movie history. You know, you're going to need a bigger boat, and from that point on, the movie is, them versus the shark for the last 45, 50 minutes. This is my all-time favorite movie. It would have been in my top 10, definitely. So I went from like, Final Destination 2 to, oh, come on, how is this not in the final 10? But right. I accept.
Well, that's where it gets kind of crazy, right? Because when you look at the next 3 movies, you're like, what is above these next 3 movies? Right, I mean, obviously I can think of some like Psycho and The Exorcist.
We'll save that for the end.
Yeah. Got it.
I gotta say one story though. When I was teaching a film class a couple years ago, and I showed Jaws, and a lot of the students hadn't seen it. And I had a podium at the front of the lecture hall where I could control the media. So during the Bed Garner scene, I always was told by the other professors, turn the volume down. We're trying to teach. And I'd be like, sure. So I always kept it kind of low. But when that scene happened, I slowly put the volume all the way up. And then boom, and my students jumped out of their fucking seats. And I was never prouder of myself.
I started a horror movie club at my school, and we watched, this was our year-end movie at the end of last year, with my logic being summer is coming, let's watch Jaws. And even now, 40 years, almost 50 years later, I still got high school kids to jump at some of the moments.
It's brilliant. Because you're expecting a shark, right? You're under the water, it's dark. What we've been taught is the scary thing is a shark. You're not expecting a head to just come out of nowhere. It's so brilliant.
Oh, well, yeah, I knew that you guys, I knew Danny was going to have some contention with that being number 14. The next entry, I can kind of understand maybe not making the top 10. The two after that, I can't. We got less than 20 minutes to go through 3 of my favorite movies ever. 3 of my favorite horror movies ever. Let's go with Scream.
I wouldn't be here without Scream. Scream was the movie that made me fall in love with movies. I went and studied film. It's honestly a film that completely changed my life. I would be, I don't know, an accountant if I had never seen Scream.
Oh, shit.
Scream is so important to me.
Mike is Randy if he didn't die in part 2.
Yes.
Spoilers.
Yeah.
Spoilers for Scream 2. It came out 25 years ago.
So, Mike, why?
Because it's scary and because it was postmodern before that became a trope that was kind of tired. The fact that they lived in a world where there were other horror movies, to me, was brilliant. And I think to a lot of people at the time, it was like, wow, you'd never seen that before. Like, they live in a movie where they live in a world where scary movies exist. It's not like to me, this is a later example. To me, the greatest stupid thing ever is in the first Twilight movie, you see Kristen Stewart Google what is a vampire. And it's like, you don't know what a fucking vampire is? Like,
oh, God.
That blows my mind. Like, but this was a movie where, people know things.
Yeah.
So, and that became like a list for me. Like all the things that Randy talked about, I would then say, I got to go watch those.
It's also the first horror movie that made horror movies cool. Yes. And so like Randy in Scream is like the kind of like the nerdy sidekick character because he's basically us. He's just obsessed with these movies and everything. But this movie made him cool. And like it made discussing horror movies cool. Like I remember this movie came out, I was 14. I was a freshman in high school, or I was just graduating from junior high. And like I loved horror movies, but I didn't really have anybody at school to talk about them with. And then all of a sudden Scream came out. And then within a year of that, I Know What You Did Last Summer and Urban Legend. And it spawned this whole generation of like young teen to adult horror movies where people my age suddenly cared about going to see horror movies. And I was like, it's happening.
Yeah.
And, and kudos to Wes Craven. He reinvented the genre by basically, it's amazing. What always gets lost in the shuffle is 2 years before this, he did New Nightmare, which is almost more meta than this movie.
Sure.
And that kind of got lost because, it's a Freddy movie. It's a franchise movie. So for him to stick with that idea of meta horror and to just completely reinvent the genre again, it was just unbelievable. And it really did for our generation. It made horror marketable. It made it cool. Because, people will tell you by the mid 90s, horror was a dying genre.
Yeah.
And then by the late 90s, you were sick and tired of these Scream clones that were coming out.
Right.
It's funny because like you guys keep talking about personal connections with these movies, and Scream makes me think about this channel itself, because this is now our third Halloween doing the Lasser cast. And I remember in the first Halloween we did like 30 days of Halloween, and we talked about our favorite movies, favorite horror movies. Scream was on my list. I did Scream for a video for one of those. And we all discussed the Halloween movies last year. And then Mike, you came on, I think twice, last year for the Halloween movies. And now we find ourselves at essentially the last Halloween movie. And we find ourselves in our final two. We're up to the 1978 classic Halloween.
Yeah.
John Carpenter's Halloween. What I'll say is that we've already kind of talked about Michael a lot on this channel. And we even just did a review with some writers from my writers group last week. Halloween, I think it's just such a tight movie. And one of the things I liked about this episode of 101 Scariest Moments, they talk about how bloodless the original Halloween is. You know, my wife doesn't want to show my daughter Halloween. And I'm like, I think you can kind of get away with it. I mean, there's some breasts and stuff, but you can get away with it. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, this is another really important movie to me. I'm so glad that they never made any sequels to this movie. This movie, to me though, I never found it that scary. I just thought it was the tone and the vibe and the aesthetic is perfect autumn. But I love this, and I do love the series. I haven't seen the last two because I didn't like the 2018 one. But I love the series. I was talking to Pete the other day, you know, what's a better trilogy, this new trilogy or 4, 5, and 6?
That's right. I didn't give you the answer. Danny, do you have an answer for that?
No. I don't like part 4 as much as other people, and I love part 6 a lot more than other people.
6 is awesome.
And like most people, I think 5 is trash.
It's just the worst 4.
Yeah, I did like 2018, while recognizing it's deeply flawed. I did not like Kills at all, and I did like Halloween Ends to an extent. I said to Pete the other night, every day since I saw it, my liking of it has gone ever so slightly down. But yeah, that's a good one. I thought Halloween should have been a lock for the top 10.
Yeah, I agree.
The fact that, I mean, you know, we just joked about it. The fact that they're still making these movies today shows the longevity of this franchise and of the character of Michael Myers. I mean, I have the freaking lunchbox here. I have the Michael Myers is, for me, the all-time scariest horror movie villain, and it's because of the mask. It's because of the blankness of the mask. It's because of the way the mask can come out of the darkness. And the scene they picked, or one of the two really scenes they picked, is the iconic scene of Jamie Lee backing up to the closet, and just the dark, like the pale mask slowly coming out of the darkness is just one of the greatest shot scenes in movie history, let alone horror movies. And then, of course, the iconic moment of him doing the, you know, what would become later on known as the Undertaker sit-up. Yeah. I mean, nothing else needs to be said about Halloween. It's Halloween. It probably should have been in the top 10, but 12 it's okay.
Yeah, well, you know what? Here's some fucking bullshit. The chest burster scene in Alien doesn't make the fucking top 10.
This was number 2 on Bravo's list all those years ago. I remember that.
Oh yeah.
This was number 2, and Jaws was number 1. And I was, and I'm such a big Jaws fan that I was just happy Jaws was number 1. So I was like, that's perfect. Those are perfect 1 and 2. Let's just. So yeah, this being at number 11 again, just for iconic status alone, and the surprise and the shock value of it. This should have been, I thought, a lot higher, but we knew it was coming in this countdown towards as we got closer to 1.
Yeah. I think I agree. I'm surprised that it's not in the top 10. The chestburster scene is obviously one of the most iconic scenes in movie history. To me, it's not. It's important on a very visceral level, but to me, it's not scary. I think there are other scenes in the film that are scary, like when the xenomorph tries to hug Dallas. That's the scariest scene to me.
Yeah.
Hey, let's hug.
Yeah.
Or when the perfect when at the very end you think it's over, and then you think like kind of like we were just talking about with The Shape and Halloween. You think it's like just like pipes on the wall, and then it starts to move, and you're like, oh shit, the xenomorph is just right there being still. To me, there's scarier moments, but it's Alien.
Yeah.
Right.
So what can we say? It's amazing.
Yes, that very well put. That's actually very well put. That like the chestburster scene is the most iconic, but yet there are scarier scenes. And yeah, like the scene with Dallas, they show that very clip when they do the credits, the opening credits for the show. That's the very last thing they show is the alien going like that.
Yeah.
So I thought it was going to be like in the top 5 at least. I was very shocked. I think probably in this group, I think I like the Alien franchise the most. I just like have always loved the Alien franchise. It's like the horror franchise that I enjoyed, and mainly because it's sci-fi. Mm-hmm. But you know, there's so many documentaries on the making of it, and just Dan O'Bannon, you know, writing the original screenplay. Yeah. It's just iconic, and there's so many imitations. Like if you look at the movies on this list, there's so many imitations of specific movies on here, like Night of the Living Dead, Jaws, Scream, Halloween, and Alien. You know, there's so many copies of these movies, you know, and we've covered the majority of these franchises on this channel. You know, there's a reason why this is within the top 20 at this point. And so I think that within our last, 8 minutes or so, but I want to get Mike to plug his channel too. What are we missing then? What's in that final top 10?
What do you guys think number 1 will be?
So I wrote down what I think are automatics. Okay. And the automatics I have 7 of them, which leaves 3 spots open. The 7 automatics that I have are The Shining, The Thing, Psycho, Poltergeist, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Exorcist, and Hereditary, because they keep showing Hereditary in the opening credits. And I've been campaigning on this channel that Hereditary should be in the top 10. So I'm stoked as shit about that, because to me, that's the best horror movie I've seen in the last probably 20, 25 years. And it's the scariest horror movie I've seen in one of the all-time scariest movies I've ever seen. So to me, those are a guaranteed lock 7. And then I put down a bunch of possibilities. The lawnmower scene from Sinister. You know, like when they do those lists on like Facebook of like the top 10 scary movies to make your heart explode. Like Sinister's, and they're like, Sinister, science declares it's the scariest movie ever.
Right.
So maybe that makes the list. Pete, you mentioned Audition last time.
Wow, yeah.
I put down Train to Busan, but then I think Night of the Living Dead might have capped Zombies for the list.
Yeah.
I'm still holding out hope for Event Horizon in the last 10.
Yeah. Talk about an alien. I love it, but it is like, it's such a descendant of Alien.
Yeah. So I'm really trying to struggle. In terms of number 1 at this point, I'm going to have to go Exorcist, just because if they've held off for this long, I think they're either going to go with The Exorcist, The Shining, or Psycho. One of those 3.
I agree. It's one of those 3. It's absolutely one of those 3.
Yeah, I hope it's not Psycho. I think that would be a really safe pick, and I don't think Psycho holds
movie, but it's not. It's seminal, and it's one of the, it was for its time. It was super important, but I do feel like it's going with a classy answer, and so far what I've liked about this list is it's not trying to be classy.
Yeah. No, I mean, of the 7 movies that I mentioned, if they made number 1 the dinner scene in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I'd be like, hell fucking yeah, let's go. Yeah. Because you want to talk about the complete opposite of a clean answer. That is dirty. It's gross. It makes you just physically ill. It's such a intense scene in just a dirty, awesome movie. But yeah, I have no idea what the other. Maybe they'll go with another like old classic Universal, like they've done Dracula, Frankenstein, Nosferatu, The Wolfman. They haven't mentioned Bride of Frankenstein. They haven't mentioned, I threw out Freaks last time.
Yeah, see, I think that would be safe, but I think, like you said about Psycho, I think that would be too safe.
Yeah,
in a way.
Insidious, I think, is one that could make it.
Yeah, that's true.
The red-faced demon jump scare.
And they've showed that a lot.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they did. They showed that a lot this episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe they're setting that up as maybe in the top 10.
Yeah. What about like Unmasked 25?
That whole movie.
Yeah, I've never seen it.
Oh, I wonder why. Yeah. You should do a double feature of that and the LA AIDS
Jabber. Yeah, I think that could be on there too.
These are two gems that Danny has found in our Lastercast time. Yeah, I do think it's those three. I think that Exorcist would win, but Exorcist wasn't the number one for that Bravo list.
I think it was three.
Okay.
Yeah.
What scene from The Exorcist then?
That's a good question.
Is it the scene where her head turns around?
That's a really interesting question because there's no jumps in that movie really, although it is very scary. I don't know.
Charlotte just said the staircase, but that wasn't even in the original release.
Young child, that wasn't in the original film.
That scene scared the hell out of a lot of my friends, though. Okay.
Well, in the original film, they don't show Pazuzu's like face on the wall either, right?
No,
that's
they do the jump cuts, but that one of him on like the cabinet in the kitchen wasn't there.
I think personally for me, the scariest part of The Exorcist is when the priest has the dream and you see Pazuzu's face like that. Yeah. That's the scariest thing for me.
Or maybe when Father Karras comes in the room and she's untied and she's just laughing.
Yes, that's fucking scary.
That's an image.
I'll tell you, the medical scenes in that movie are terrifying to rewatch.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. We only have a few minutes, so do we want to wrap this up and give Mike a chance to plug his podcast?
Yes, and Mike, I had so much fun with you, man. If you want to come back for our final 10, you're more than welcome to come back. I'll have more time next week, too, because I don't have stuff after work.
Sure, and I'd also love to talk about Queer for Fear. Shudder's been killing it lately with these series.
Oh, man, I review that on Fridays. I freaking love it. What a great series that is.
Pete, have you been watching it?
I have not. I just have so many fucking things to review.
They get into the classic Universal stuff, too. It's really good.
Yeah.
So my podcast is called Pop Culture Man Children. You can find it anywhere podcasts are found. It's also on YouTube. Halloween's a big time of the year for us, and we do this year we did 5 Halloween episodes. This year we did a central theme, which is witches. So there's an episode on the Japanese film House. There's an episode on Roald Dahl's The Witches and its different adaptations. There's an episode on Hocus Pocus and Part 2. And there's an episode where we compare The Craft to practical magic. And then there's an episode where I talked with our friend David Weiner, and we talked a little bit about witches.
Ah, very nice. And if you want to see more about David Weiner, you can check out the interview that Pete and I did with him a couple days ago. That's up on the channel. We have our review of Halloween and Halloween Ends and Hellraiser with some excellent horror writers, Joshua McMillan, Megan Stockton, and Daniel Barnett. But is that his?
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a lot of fun. That's up on the channel now. Tonight I'm reviewing Chucky episode 3. Friday, Queer for Fear episode 4. Mike, thanks so much for joining us. Hopefully you're here next week for 10-1.
Yes, and I'll do what we have
out there. I think number 1 is Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 Leatherface. I'm just throwing that out there.
Nah. Well, I'm gonna do what you do on your show when it's time to end. When you have a guest, you say, "Go bye-bye."
Go bye-bye.
There you go. Nice.